Hey there, everybody. I hope that your new year is off to a wonderful. Eesh, that's really embarrassing. I could have sworn I silenced this. I gotta take this one. Sorry, guys. Just 1 second, okay? Yeah, Jesus? Yeah, well, you actually caught me right as I was starting a YouTube video. Oh, yeah, of course you knew that. You know everything. Oh, okay. Everyone, Jesus says he has a message for you, the viewers. You want me to quote you on that verbatim? Yeah, but Jesus, I don't normally use that kind of language in my videos. Okay, okay, of course, you're the boss. We're still on for brunch on next week. Cool, cool, yeah, okay, I'll see you then. Bye. All right, everyone, that was Jesus, of Nazareth, and he has a special message just for y'all. It is that virginity is a social construct and it is bullshit. So, virginity is a social construct. It's not something that God ordained, it's something that humans made up. So, why would I want to talk about it? Especially given the fact that the concept of virginity and the idea of purity culture and that you should save sex for marriage and only have sex with one person ever, and that person needs to be the opposite sex from your assigned sex at birth. All that harmful stuff is, as Jesus said himself, bullshit. So, why do I want to still make a video about virginity? Well, it's because for me, growing up, virginity was something that I was really into. And some of my reasoning for that was the crappy reasoning that I was taught that being a virgin, abstaining from sex forever or for a short time, until marriage, was a holy thing and it made you virtuous or whatever. But there was also um, another aspect to why I was really into the idea of virginity growing up. And that's because before I even realized it myself, I was a queer person. I was asexual, I was non binary, I was not interested in men. And as a person assigned female at birth, those were the only people I was supposed to ever have sex with. One man forever. Ugh. And so the idea that I learned growing up Catholic that I could be a virgin forever, and not only would God still love me, but I might, be holy and special and set apart if I remained a virgin forever, um, was a big encouragement to me in a way that I think a lot of LGBT folks growing up don't have, especially if you find yourself growing up in, for instance, some like Protestant circles where the idea of remaining a virgin forever was not the goal. You can be a virgin for a little while, and that's great, that's holy, but the idea of wanting to be a virgin for your whole life is shameful and not what God wants, um, and all that, and that's the harmful stuff. But the point of this video is that for me growing up, I was able to find some comfort and encouragement in the concept of virginity, and especially from the virgin saints. So, what was it about these virgin saints that was so intriguing to me as a repressed queer kid um, with a horrible haircut? I had bangs straight across my forehead and a cowlick that made them sort of stick up on one end for the entirety of my life until I was like 18. Oh my gosh, yeah, like 18. Um, I had ugly metal glasses. I wore baggy jeans and baggy sweatshirts basically every day of my life throughout middle school and high school. And so I was, not the most fashionable or coolest kid in my school. Um, but part of what made me okay with that and sort of in some ways gave me the permission to dress like that and be like that were the Virgin Saints. Um, because many of them, to avoid male interest, would cut their hair really short. Santa Rosa de Lima actually rubbed pepper all over her face to make it red and blotchy so that her suitors would stop having interest in her. Um, and yeah, she cut off her hair So did Joan of Arc. So did some of the saints who were assigned female at birth, but for various reasons, some of them to escape suitors, but others, because in my opinion, they might have, if they lived today, identified as non binary or as trans men, um, cut their hair short and wore men's clothing so that they could become monks and live among men for all their life, as a man themselves, and were only discovered to be assigned female at birth at their death or in other circumstances that got them sort of caught. Um, these saints were very interesting to me, and part of that I think is because I am non-binary. This idea of being gender non-conforming and it being part of your holiness was really exciting to me even before I knew I was non-binary. It was really encouraging to me to know that if I dressed like a man, if I cut my hair short, not only would God still love me, not only would it not be a sin, but also God might make that part of God's plan for me. Um, Especially look at the story of Joan of Arc. She was executed, brutally tortured, and burned to death by the Catholic Church as an institution because they did not like that she wore men's clothing. She told them over and over again that she would not stop wearing men's clothes until God told her to stop wearing men's clothes, because she claimed that God had told her that wearing men's clothing, whether that's the soldier's garb in which she fought for her country or just standard everyday men's clothes, that was part of God's vocation for her. And she died rather than conform to the gender norms of her day. And that's really moving to me as a transgender person. But even before I knew I was trans, it meant a lot to me to know that while our culture, our world might force us to conform in so many different ways, including conform to the gendered expectations for us, and also to get married, have sex, have children, be an obedient wife to a man, all that kind of thing, that there were saints who said no to that, and that their no was holy. Their no to the world was a holy yes to God's will for them. And I know I'm going to end up putting my foot in my mouth and say something that will sound like I'm saying, oh, so virginity is actually a good thing and we can reclaim it or something. And I don't want to say that, because virginity in general as a construct, this idea that human beings change, that something in your identity or your holiness or your virtue changes after you've had sex, is, to quote the wise words of Jesus who gave me a call, is bullshit. And yet, there is something about virginity in the stories of some of these virgin saints that really resonates with me and excites me. And it's because for them, I believe that virginity was less about them never having sex and more about them never having to submit to a human man, in a society in which they were expected and coerced into that kind of submission. And the main virgin saint that I want to talk about is the most famous one. She's in this picture behind me. It's the Virgin Mary. Um, in Catholicism, it is believed that Mary never had sex ever, all her life. Protestants would agree that when she conceived Jesus, she was a virgin. She had never had sex. Catholics believe that after Jesus, she also continued to be a virgin, that she and Joseph never had sex. And again, growing up, I was very invested in this idea that Mary never had sex. And I think for me, part of that was um, it made her a bit queerer for me, and therefore I could sort of relate to her better. I didn't want to have sex with the dude. She never had sex with the dude. But that's a very sort of shallow way of connecting to someone, because I want to talk about in this video how whether or not Mary never had sex or had a little bit of sex or had tons of sex, she was regarded by her society as tainted, as someone who, if she lived in our day, would be called a slut, because she got pregnant outside of marriage. She broke the rules and the expectations about when to have sex and with whom to have sex. And she Her life was very nearly ruined for it. I have been struggling to put my thoughts about Mary and virginity into words for like a couple months now. So if you follow me on Instagram or Tumblr or Twitter, you might have seen that I sort of wrote a little like poem slash reflection thing about this idea near the end of Advent. And I want to read that here because this little reflection of mine is the closest I've gotten to articulating what I want to articulate about Mary. So, yeah, here it is. Mary, teen mom, in those terrifying days between your jubilant yes to God seeking shelter in you and Joseph's yes to marrying you despite your indiscretion, daring to get knocked up out of wedlock? Did childhood friends desert you? Did your father weep in shame? Would you have laughed, disbelieving, if informed that the primary epithet bestowed on you by those future generations who called you blessed is virgin? Mary, teen mom, against whom every packed in turned its back, about whom maybe neighbors laughed and mothers told their daughters, "Don't be like her," spitting your name like a nasty thing. You relate to the round-bellied girl eating alone in a cafeteria crowded with harsh stares. You relate to the girl singled out at church for wearing a too short skirt, blamed for the lust of grown men who ought to pluck out their eyes for looking at her at all. Yet the words fastened to people like these are much less pretty than your epithets. Mary, teenage rebel, you who embraced impropriety with a song, you full of grace but called disgraceful by men who would have you stoned. What in heaven's name does virginity have to do with you? Unless for you, virginity might mean not no to sex, but yes to choosing for yourself, defining yourself, controlling your own body, your own life. Hail, you who looked the status quo square in the eye and laughed, who saw the grace in being called disgraceful by a world not ready to be turned on its head. You defy categorization, virgin or slut, child of God or God's own mother, obedient servant or one who could expect Jesus to do as you asked and bring fine wine into a world that's parched for it. Teach us this defiance, devout rebel. Teach us your fervor for God's revolution, your thirst for liberation from convention. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the idea of virginity when applied to saints like Mary. It's this idea that whether or not any of these people ever had sex or not doesn't matter. It really doesn't. It doesn't change how holy they were, the good deeds they did, the good fruit they brought into the world, the glory they brought to God. It doesn't change whether they had sex or didn't have sex. But for them, this idea of being a virgin was more about refusing to conform to the world that would have them submit to a man. And it's something that has given me a lot of life and hope as a queer person who, by my very nature, could not conform to the world without destroying who God made me to be. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on this idea, please let me know. If I messed up anywhere and said something really icky, please let me know so I can apologize and correct it. If you have questions or confusions or whatever, feel free to chat with me on YouTube, on Tumblr, emailing me at queerlychristian36@gmail.com. But yeah, whether or not you agree with me about this idea, I hope that at the very least I gave you something to sort of ponder. Next time you hear someone mention the Virgin Mary or you hear someone talking about purity culture, maybe you can ponder the expectations forced upon each and every one of us regarding our sex lives. and think about how we might liberate ourselves and liberate others from those expectations, so that no one feels pressured not to have sex, pressured to have sex, pressured to only have certain kinds of sex with certain people or one person. So, yeah. Sorry, gosh, gotta silence this. Oh, it's a text from Jesus. Why is everyone so obsessed with my mom's sex life, though? Weirds me out. You're so right, JC. You're so right.